Thank you all for coming tonight for this panel. I'm David Sullivan. I teach at Cabrillo College. I teach English and film classes there. I'm also a poet, and I've written a little bit about the Iraq War, and so that's part of the reason Julie and Hamza asked me to help moderate. I'm as interested as you are at listening to these experts talk about their experiences. First, just some housekeeping. I want to thank Hamza and Julie for creating this and making the space for it. I also want to thank the Vets Hall and Chris and David for opening up the space for us, so thanks a lot for helping out. Also, we're going to have a talk for a little over an hour and a half, and then we'll take a break. Towards the end, we'll have some questions. There are a couple people that have some pens and pieces of paper, so if you'd like to have something to write down some questions, just raise your hand and they'll give you some pens and paper, and then collect those questions towards the end so we can have them up here on stage. Also, towards the back, we have Jess. She is a trauma counselor from up at UCSC. Some of the things we're going to be talking about may be hard to hear. If you want to talk to somebody, just please go find Jess, and you can take a little break if you need to and go to another part of the building. Other housekeeping? I think we're good. Oh, after the break, Yaseen will come and do a little bit of stand-up comedy around trauma and surviving trauma and trying to laugh about it.
That's
weird. So first, let's just start off, and I'd like each member of the panel to say a little bit about why they're here, why they chose to be part of this, and a little bit about their background. So we'll just keep it short as an intro, 2 or 3 minutes apiece. Who would like to start?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Hamza Haidari. I am here today because of the recent political events that have happened with escalation of threats of war in the Middle East region again. As someone who has lived through that and saw what that looks like, I've grown advocating for a culture of peace and acceptance. And I'm just simply not okay with the fact of starting another war. And as a person, as a citizen of this country, I have a voice and it should be heard. And I imagine a lot of people here feel the same way as well. The idea came to my mind. I met with my friend Julie here and we chatted about it, and this has come together. And I hope this conversation is going to be productive, and I hope it leaves all of you with a deeper understanding of that perspective and those stories. And I hope we could all walk out of here continuing to advocate for more peace in this country and in the world overall, because we really need it very desperately.
Hamza, can you just say a few words about your background, your family, where you're from?
Certainly. I was born and raised in Baghdad, Iraq. I moved to the United States as a refugee in 2008. My family, my parents live in Sacramento right now. I am a Santa Cruz resident for the last few years. Lucky for me, I have my parents here. My mom is right there. My dad is right here. And we've got a little bit of family affair going on with my little brother being Yaseen the comedian, joining us later this evening for some comedy.
Thank you.
My name is Mazin Haidari, and I'm Hamza's dad. I hope he's a well-known guy for you. So first of all, I want to say something. I've been here in the United States, my home, for the last 12 years. And I'm still suffering. I have what they call it the language barrier. So please bear with my language. But at the same time, I have much big barriers against the war. So this is why I'm here tonight. And thank you for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello all. Thanks for having us. I know Hamza through a program called Do Love Live. We kind of do some philanthropic stuff. I'm here as a combat veteran, somebody who loves our country dearly, just to listen at this time in our, I guess what I'd say, our history. I think this concept of empathy and focusing on our similarities versus our differences, and just literally listening is very important. I'm excited, coming more so from the U.S. military, the Army side, to be able to hear, what I saw from a little different vantage point, a little different perspective when I was over in Iraq. And my background is I went to West Point, graduated in 2000, shortly after September 9/11, 2001. We all knew that there were some combat deployments in our future. Mine was actually at the beginning of 2003, so right on the heels of the entire Operation Enduring Freedom 1. Spent a little bit of time in Fallujah, Ramadi, most of the time in the Al-Anbar province out in Al-Qaim, kind of a hot spot called Husayba. So, fascinating time in my life. It's kind of serendipitous that I met Hamza, because going back and forth about the different perspectives, just on slightly different times when maybe we were there in obviously slightly different places, but just being able to see those different perspectives, listen and empathize is something that is pretty fascinating and important. So thank you for having me.
Thank you.
No. Yeah, there we go. Hello. My name is Erika Abrahamian, and I was born in Iran. My father is Armenian, my mother is Muslim, and I was born in 1978, months before the revolution happened, and when I was 2, the Iran-Iraq war happened. I was 10 when the war ended, and we didn't leave until I was 15 years old. So my entire childhood was the war experience. And I'm here, I don't know any of these folks, I just met them. I'm here because I feel like it's really important to have spaces where we talk about these things face to face. And I know that war is an abstraction for many Americans. And I think it's really, really useful to hear the different experiences that happen beyond what we just see portrayed in Hollywood and the news and social media. So thank you for putting this together.
Thank you.
Oh, it's working. I figured it out. My name is Helbard Alkhassada. I'm also a child of war from Iran. I came here during the Islamic Revolution, and I'm Assyrian, not Syrian, but Assyrian. My family's been Assyrian. I was just telling everyone how I did a 23andMe DNA thing just to prove my family wrong, that I'm not totally Assyrian. And it turned out, no, very Assyrian. It was 98.5%, and it was pretty impressive. But we're an Eastern Orthodox Christian sect in a very Islamic Muslim part of the world. And during the war, we had to leave and came here to America. And the reason I'm here is because you told me I had to be here. So I was, I think, threatened. So no, we had a conversation about 3 weeks ago, a month ago. And next thing I know, here I am. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
So my name is Julie Howell. Let's see. I am a 5-year Army vet. I did 2 combat deployments to Iraq, similar to Dave. I was there during the initial assault, piggybacking with 101st Airborne. We were Patriots. We were defending their high-altitude air defense. My second deployment, I was attached to an infantry unit in central Baghdad. So I was what we now refer to as female engagement team. So I was female searcher doing raids, patrols, and checkpoints in and around central Baghdad from about 04, 05 was my second deployment. And I spent 5 glorious months as a prison guard in northern Baghdad in a region called Taji. I think Hamza and I were on the same page when escalation occurred in Iran, and we both were like, we don't have the capacity as world citizens to be able to carry another conflict on top of everything else that's going on. And I think we both felt really passionately about being able to create that space for stories that you're not necessarily going to hear, we're so saturated with, you know, the veteran and the wounded veteran and American exceptionalism, and that all comes at a cost, and rarely do we hear the people that are caught in the middle of these conflicts. And everyone experiences trauma in different ways, and no one has the right to judge another person's trauma in the way they engage with conflict around them. And so I was just really excited for us to be able to put this together and to have so many unique voices and so many unique perspectives that we're all willing to graciously give up their time, and for you to graciously give up your time to hear these stories. I'm overwhelmed at how many people have taken the time to be here with us, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart, and I thank all of you for being here with us, and hopefully we move forward tonight and make some friends and learn a lot about each other and learn a lot about the ways that we can move forward together, recognizing that everybody carries something within them that we're never really going to be able to identify, and we don't need to, but we can just have empathy for one another and for everyone's unique stories. So thank you again.
Thank you. And you've already touched on this, but why don't you, whoever would like to, tell us a little bit about your experiences of what wars. What was your personal experience, involvement? What did you have to deal with? What did you see? What are you carrying with you afterwards? And whoever would like to talk a little bit about that history. Yeah, 2 minutes.
Is this on? Yeah. I've been thinking about this question for the past 4 or 5 days, and I think when you're a child, you look to the adults to see what you should experience when you're going through something like that. So my memories of that time, one, that was all I knew. So I couldn't imagine that there was a different option for having a childhood. I remember a whole year of missing school in 3rd grade. We couldn't go to school because of the bomb raids. I remember that we never took vacations. Every vacation was running away. We would kind of have news that the bomb raids were going to be heavier at certain times, and we would go north or we would go east where we would not be attacked. So my experience was very much, at the time I was just a child. I didn't really have language to put it in perspective. I hadn't known anything before the revolution. I think for the adults, it was such a shock because their world had been divided in two. And I had just come into it not knowing any different. Yeah.
Thank you.
A couple of years ago, I realized that I was my father's age when he got us out. And that, to me, made me sort of pause, because right now, there's no way I would even fathom grabbing my family, my wife, the kid, and just escaping and never looking back. And which made me start thinking about myself at that time and what I was thinking, because my father, all of us, obviously was freaking out, and my mother was just trying to keep us, the 3 sons, from knowing what was going on. And I, being the youngest of the 3 boys, at the time, even though I was that young, I realized that it had become normal. That's the thing that's really difficult, because there was a moment that has stuck with me when students were protesting at the local school, 8th graders, 9th graders, young kids. And they made a circle and started chanting against the Shah. And the military showed up and opened fire on the school. And we went and picked up my brothers from school that day, and the windows were broken, everything is destroyed on the outside of the school. And my brothers come out with their books, smiling, and you know, big smiles on their face because they had an exciting day at school. It had normalized. And it was then, I think my mother realized that we had to get out. This wasn't, she knew this wasn't normal. We didn't know. We thought this is how life is. So when you leave that and you come to New York in 1979, 1980, New York, something hits you, and not that, whoa, this is awesome, I'm in New York. It's none of these people know what's going on. Like, nobody here gets it. They don't get it. Like, you go to school all of a sudden, and all the kids are sitting there drawing and having a great time, and your school's not getting shot up. Nobody gets it. Like, it never got through to people. 40 years, it hasn't gone through to people. It's not soldiers fighting soldiers. That's not what war is. It's not, people with gear going out after each other. It's people in the middle of soldiers fighting soldiers. Everyone's in the crossfire that ends up having to deal with it afterwards.
Okay, I'll take it from here, my friend. So it's good to hear this opinion because they were both kids when the war started, the first Gulf War, and they have two big things happened in their life. First, the revolution, so the Shah gone and Khomeini came, the Islamic regime. So it was a big change, the regime in the Middle East and especially in Iran. And then the first Gulf War start, 1980. And they were kids at that time. I was a soldier. They took me as a soldier to the front. So this is why I have different things in my mind, different stories stuck to my mind. I was trying to keep it away and try to forget it. It's not easy. So you mentioned something very unique, soldiers fighting soldiers, and you are in the middle, as a human, as a baby. The problem is the soldiers is a human too. So I have my own life. I was like a young guy. I just graduated from the school, from agriculture, engineering college, and I was looking that the life will be good, and I have a lot of friends. But no, it didn't work that way. They took me to the front right away after graduation. And I found myself, I have to fight with somebody, I don't know him. And I don't know what's the reason, why the war started. So I don't want to go deep in details because it will be really complicated and it's more like a political, ugly game. But as a human, I figure out after years of that really hard time and really bad experience, even there is some, advantages or good things as an output of that experience. But I found out in simple words, and again, excuse me for my language barriers, I would try to express myself the best way I can. I think the war, it's like a chemical equation. So let's say H2O, the water, hydrogen and oxygen, and you have like, to use something, what they call it, the...
Catalyst?
Exactly. So the war has main elements, main factors, people and weapon. But the catalyst will be the hateness. If you encourage the hateness, you're gonna have the war. If you keep it down, if you encourage the love, you will never have a war, even if you have weapons and people and soldiers or whatever. So simply, it's in my mind, in my simple mind, I put it this way. But being in a war, it's totally different things, different life or it's not life, because it's something out of the normal situation of human being. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm fortunate to be here today. Maybe you guys are fortunate to see such a guy, because my generation is gone. You know, in that first Gulf War, Iraqi part, they lost around 800,000 young men. 800,000 died, passed away, killed in the war. And the Iranian part lost almost the same number or a little bit less. So you are talking about 1.5 million young people in their 20s. They lost their life. And after 8 years of war, the Iraqi president, he says, well, I'm sorry, Iran, it was a mistake. So, and nothing changed. And nobody knows why the war was started even. It's all, you know, we don't want to mix political situation with this issue, but it is an ugly game. And we as a people, we have to understand that this kind of feeding or brainwashing that guide us to the war, it's not always, it's always wrong. It's always wrong. I don't know these guys. They don't know me. Why I fight them? Why I have to kill them, or they have to kill me? So simply, the war is a result of an act of hateness. We are the people, we don't hate each other. But if somebody who have a benefit of doing that, they will gonna do it. So we have to be more smart and to try our best to stop them. Thank you.
Thanks, Mazin.
Maybe I'll give a perspective from the American soldier side of or the soldier side of the perspective. So, I mean, we busted the Berman. Man, it was early March of 2003. And our whole military career up to that point had been trained on conventional war and, you know, engaging from a distance. And that lasted about 3 weeks, 4 weeks or something like that, maybe. And then all the, I guess what I'd say the existing Iraqi army kind of, pull it up closer, thanks. All the existing Iraqi army kind of melted into the rest of the civilian infrastructure. And then there, you know, almost became this more of a guerrilla style, like face-to-face engagement that you want to talk about a culture shock for anybody trained conventionally, or you know, I'd say probably 98% of the military, where we shifted to literally going on a door-to-door basis, eye-to-eye, developing human intelligence and relating to the entire, you know, Iraqi people, and trying to find out who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. And, you know, you talk about being stuck in the middle. There was a lot of time where we literally, our plan was just to go out, and the bad guys were the ones who shot at us, so we'd have to react to that. You know what I mean? So when you start thinking about strategy, when you start thinking about young, you know, early 20s to mid 30s guys and gals out there trying to execute a mission, like it was literally a huge challenge. And for the first 3 months, you're trying to develop relationships. You're trying to understand what the environment is in an environment where, you know, the concept of taking an American democracy, and that's just not what we experienced in the context of, you know, where we were in our little bubble in Iraq. So, you know, you have all these preconceived notions and preconceived perceptions that you go into, and then a whole massive amount of training that the minute you went north, or at least I should say the month after you go north into Iraq, everything changes. And then it's all about being face-to-face, engaging in a way where you're trying to develop relationships, you're trying to truly understand. And you know what, I'd say there was maybe a quarter of the population who adamantly disliked us, you know, to the point where they'd shoot at us and try and do us harm. There's a quarter of the population that were really happy to see us there. I'd say 100% of the everyone else was in the middle, but 100% of the population, they all wanted normalcy. They all wanted their kids to be able to grow up under an environment that was fundamentally different than what you two had shared with us. They wanted to be able to, let their kids go to school. You talk about a shooting at school. There would be times where we would go to schools, hospitals, and you'd literally see, you could see through the bullet holes in the repairs and the bullet holes in the repairs and the explosions and the damage. Like you could literally see the sequencing, if you will, of like, oh man, this isn't the first time. This is not the first rodeo where this has gone down and there's been, just ridiculous, unthinkable things that, we kind of have to go in there and try and provide some type of security and normalcy. And then it was even more challenging because you had, everybody kind of in the region that were part of terrorist organizations, or maybe they're coming in from Syria or Jordan, or they're at that point, Iraq was like, okay, there's a concentration of guys and gals with an American flag on their right shoulder. So, their respective leadership wanted to, draw some blood or whatever that looked like. So it was just a really crazy void for a guy and a gal or anybody who grew up in America in a fundamentally different place, like in New York City where you don't have to worry about getting shot up, trained in a fundamentally different way, and then going over to a culture where, quite frankly, we had some training and we had some language, some ability to teach us some language to where we could interact, but for the most part, I'd say it was a on-the-job training world, to put it lightly. So that's kind of at least the initial part of kind of the culture shock, and then almost like the reacclimation to, okay, what are we going to do here to bring some semblance and peace and order and of course, idealistically, we're coming in. We want to be the good guys. I was literally in a cavalry unit, so this concept of the cavalry is coming, is like, okay, great. So we're here. Now what? Type of thing. And that's when a little bit of chaos ensued, but a lot of learning ensued. And if we were eye to eye, face to face, and just truly engaging, that's when we found out that we could A, learn a lot, but B, your moral compass was a lot easier in helping you align the mission other than go out and wait till you get shot, or go run a vehicle checkpoint and look for what, so that it was just kind of a dichotomy that was really unique when we got there. So I think that was more than 2 minutes, so I'll pause.
Thanks, Dave. Hamza? Oh, just your experiences, background in terms of war and effect on you.
My experience was probably different, yet similar to everyone's here. I very clearly remember the last war that started in 2003, and it just seems to be endless to this day. I very much remember the 48 hours before, which is when George W. Bush gave a warning to Saddam Hussein to step out of power. Otherwise, the invasion will begin. Though that was, everything goes on hold. Your entire life stops. You don't go to school. You don't resume a normal life, as like Erika was saying. And I remember the days after. I remember the falling of a system. I don't imagine many people here have lived through in a state where the system did not exist anymore. And for us, it did not. There was no police force left. There was no power, no water. All these services have been shut out. And all of a sudden, you have a government that's been ruling with an iron fist for the last 30 years. It's completely gone. And mayhem ensued. It took a while for us to figure out how to move forward. I remember doing a lot of community work on a small scale, organizing within a block, literally in the block that you live, you organize within that block. And I remember setting up checkpoints in each corner using the trunks of palm trees, and cutting those up and putting them in a zigzag format so that cars would have to slow down, and we can vet people going in and out of our blocks, making sure that we don't have danger or threatening intruders. I remember going back to school, and it was incredibly eerie because we did not know when the next bomb is going to hit. And that continued for years until it became very normal, like you were saying. It became normal to get up in the morning and walk to school and casually see a dead body on the side of the road and continuing to walk past it. And I remember I used to walk to my school. I was in middle school and then in high school, and my brothers and sisters' elementary schools were a little bit on my way too. So for part of that way, I walk with them and then I depart. And if I saw something like that, then I'm like, oh, okay, just come to this side and we're gonna keep walking. All of that, let alone all the attacks that continued to happen, it became incredibly difficult to live a normal life, which at the time I didn't know. I only realized that when I came here. Luckily for me, I still remember my childhood being pretty amazing. I had a lot of fun. I learned how to swim in the Tigris, which is something not a lot of people get to say. I played a lot of games. I had a lot of friends. I rode around my bicycle. I was quite the troublemaker. My mom and dad had to put up with a lot. But I didn't realize how messed up it was until I came here. And I was sitting in a classroom, and I'm addressing my teacher by their first name, if they allow it, which is something most of them do. I am not scared of not turning homework because there isn't a stick waiting for me for however many whacks, as many questions as there were on the homework. School was interactive, computers, projects, teamwork. Then moving on from school, playing sports and being part of a team. I remember the first time I played on a real soccer team and I had a jersey, and I got picked up from a pickup game. One coach said, "You come play with us," and 2 days later I'm on a flight to Idaho, and Boise, Idaho for I didn't know at the time, it was a big tournament. It was the United States Regionals for competitive soccer. And I'm out there, they throw me on the field in the second half, we're tied 2-2. I put on a jersey, I go on the field, the ref pulls me out, I forgot to wear shin guards. A concept I didn't know. Apparently everybody here wears shin guards. And then I started to look back and I just said, wow, I played this game barefooted or in flip-flops in 120-degree weather on asphalt using bricks as goals and a plastic ball as a soccer ball. So then the contrast started really settling in, and started realizing I need to work on some things inside. I need to accept my reality now, let go of past traumas, and no longer live with the guilt for others that are very close to me who still live the way that I used to live.
Thanks, Hamza. Interesting too, the talk about children and even those in war, in their 20s are children too, in a way. And just that commonality of experiences. I thought it was interesting too that you mentioned George Bush and the ultimatum to step down from power if you know anything. We talk about knowing about other cultures. The notion of calling somebody out and challenge them, you get it publicly, is exactly the way to make someone not be able to step down. And interesting too, we're also dealing with different languages. So it's Arabic, but it's Arabic spoken differently in different cities in Iraq. It's Farsi as well as Arabic in Iran. It's Aramaic, Assyrian, which is still spoken. So, many of those kind of cultural things. You talked a little bit about getting some lessons in it, but how much you're stretching, which can be a growth point, but also can be a breaking point. Julie, can you say a little bit about your experiences? What was war like for you?
It definitely wasn't what I thought it was going to be. I think Dave and I are the only people that, in theory at least, volunteered to participate in this monstrosity. Everyone else just caught themselves in the middle of it. completely different from Hamza's childhood memories. I can remember playing with kids when I was probably kindergarten or first grade, and like making leaves sail down the gutter in the rain like they're ships. And for some reason, because little kids are weird, we're all talking about how we want to go out. Someone's like, I want to die in my sleep. I want to die of a heart attack. And I stood up at 6 or 7 years old and said, well, I'm going to die in a war giving somebody else freedom. So that notion of like true patriotism is being willing to throw yourself in the line of fire for somebody else or on someone else's behalf. That was instilled in me in a really young age, whether it was intentional or not. My grandpa was a Pearl Harbor survivor. My grandma was a nurse in New Guinea. They met at a USO dance in Mason City, Iowa. He served in Korea. He retired. All of my uncles, my father, they served in either the Army or the Navy in Vietnam. Like, I was raised in this culture where despite your politics, despite your employment or whatever you do, even if you hated it, you still promote the sense of service and sacrifice. And I don't know what other little weirdo is going to say something like that, but I carried that with me, and I always knew that I was going to join the military. I joined the Army on my 17th birthday. I had to get a permission slip signed so I could stay at a hotel room by myself because I turned 17 at midnight, and then 8 hours later, I joined the Army. I left 3 months after high school. I graduated at 17, so I turned 18 in basic. My path to the conflict is convoluted and a story for a whole nother time. But I remember when this all kicked off, we had been in Kuwait waiting for something to happen for like 3 months. We got to Kuwait right after Thanksgiving of 2002. We were set up a Patriot unit about 20 clicks south of the border, or maybe 50. But as soon as Scud started volleying over the border, you hear the alarm, lightning, 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 and everyone put on their chem gear, and we were in it. And then we drove north for 5 days, pretty much 3 days of that straight. We're all on all kinds of weird meds for malaria and biohazards, and we're all taking diet pills to keep us awake, and there's only so much water, and there's no food, it's all MREs, and you're just like rolling in, occupying this space, thinking, this is baller, this is badass, and then there's no one around. Everyone was terrified, rightfully so. But, my first deployment, there wasn't a whole lot of engagement because everyone was still hiding, because no one knew who was good, no one knew who was bad. They were still trying to sort through each other, and we were just hoping for the best. I remember getting home and not fitting into like civilian society. I got out right after, and I lived in a crappy refurbished garage. I was working as a graveyard cook at Denny's. I was a raging alcoholic, and I was like, well, this is bogus, so I'm gonna volunteer to go back. And my first drill weekend, they got activated, and I volunteered to go with them because civilian life sucked so bad. And 5 or 6 months after I'd gotten back from my first deployment, I was already back in Baghdad. And that was just such a different experience. We lived in Uday Hussein's guest houses, his palace, right off the Tigris. I worked on the 14 July bridge. I got to watch the sunrise over the Tigris River every day. It was such a blessing. And I got to engage with women who offered me their lunch, and I played with what we would call bridge rats. I played with the little kids that were on my checkpoint, and I would go down to the road to have chai with their family when they would ask me to take their kids home with me. And it was just such a different experience. And I cherish those moments, but at the same time, like everyone's saying, it becomes normal that you have to sit in a dining hall with your helmet on because you don't know when a mortar round's gonna come in. Right before I got to my base, a couple contractors were killed because a worker came in with a suicide bomb that was loaded down with ball bearings. And so he took out half of the dining facility. So then you're sitting in full battle rattle, so 60 pounds of gear and all your ammo and a helmet, sitting there trying to eat your food. It just became normal that missiles were coming over, mortars were coming over. We were in and out of scud bunkers all the time. You always have your weapon ready. It's just, you operate in such a weird state of panic at all times, but you think that it's normal and you think that it's totally fine. And you try and sleep and you do what you can, and then you don't realize till you get home that you were operating at a level that no human being has the ability to sustain. And so when I think about just my year or just my 18 months, to think about the fact that, like, how long it's taken me to wade through that, to think about kids growing up in this, and it's a constant and there's no escaping, like, that's when I realized that that little kid in the gutter saying, I'm gonna die for this, it's all propaganda, and I had no idea what I was talking about. I was 6, 7, but the hangover that it leaves you with, and the guilt and the shame and the sorrow and everything else, like, that's the thing that you're left with at the end of it, and you don't have that pride anymore, for me at least. Like, I don't have that, you know, I'm proud to be a veteran, whatever, but that weird guilt that stands behind the curtain of the people that we lost on our side, the losses that we caused for others on your sides, like, that's something that definitely trumps the patriotism and the sense of belonging and all that stuff that I was fed for so long. That whole notion, it evaporated when I finally reckoned with what I experienced.
Thank you all. Maybe you can talk, and you've already touched on it a little bit, but so you've gone through these experiences at whatever age. How do you recover from the trauma? What after effects do you still feel? What's helped you work through it, whether personal interaction, writing? What helps you deal with it? What is helpful? What do you want to be asked by others about these events?
I think for a long time, particularly because I came here as a teenager, my family left Iran when I was 15, and we spent a year in Spain while we were waiting for immigration to let us into the country. So I was 16 years old, and I entered as a junior in at a high school, and I didn't speak any English. And the high school that I went to was upper middle class, predominantly white kids who had grown up together in this like bucolic little town. So I had a lot of shame about growing up the way that I grew up. And I hid it for a long time. I didn't tell people. And I think what's helped is talking about it. What's helped is to kind of deal with the stigma of it on my own, with therapy, with yoga, with mindfulness practices, with writing, and then be able to open up to other people about it and know that it wasn't my fault to be born where I was born and be born when I was born, that it could be just anybody. Yeah.
Can you say a little bit more about the novel you're writing and what got you to do that?
I'm writing a novel that I've been writing for on and off for the past 10 years. And a lot of the healing work that I've done has been through putting distance between myself and these characters. So you asked earlier why not write a memoir. And I think that detachment, having the distance, and being able to talk about these stories as if they happen to somebody else is actually pretty healing. To not have to revisit them with such a charge every time. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Therapy is awesome. Everyone should be in therapy. All of you. Everyone go get a therapist. Therapy is awesome. My mother used to, we had blackouts at 10 o'clock every night, and sirens, air raid sirens and everything. So my mother used to put me in my bed and cover me with pillows, just in case if the house gets bombed, the pillows will protect me. The shrapnel won't go through this pillow. Yeah. That's true. Yeah.
He did it for me.
My grandfather
Put
pot
the
on
pot
his
the head. Life hack. So, and so I, to this day, I'll wake up if I have a stressful day, I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I've thrown the pillow over my head. It doesn't go away. It's not something that you just forget. It doesn't go away. And whenever my wife will watch shows like Homeland or something, and there'll be like an air raid siren during that show, and I just freak out, and I'm out, I'm done. I'll go into the kitchen, make some noise and stuff like that. I can't. I still hate that sound, and talking about it is the cure, I guess, to keep yourself from going nuts. Talking about it is awesome. Telling people about it is awesome. But I somehow have found moments of hilarity through the process, and that's helped me through the years because I joke about a lot of the things that happened while we were there. And you look back at it, and when you think of it that way and you start processing it in more of like, okay, I was a kid, I had no choice, that was it. I had no choice. I was there. So, I'm not going to sit here and blame people and, just point fingers and be angry the rest of my life. But yeah, the certain things will never go away. Certain sounds, I remember when 2003, when the bombing happened in Iraq, and the first thing I thought about when I saw the video of that live footage of it happening, the first thing I thought about was, the kids. I thought about you. I was like, the kids. There's kids there. There's children there. I know there's people are people, but man, there's kids. What are they doing there? Like that was the first thing I thought about when I saw that. But it's therapy. You got to go see somebody. You got to talk to somebody. It took me until I was 41 years old. I finally gave in and I went. It took me that long, but I went. I did it, and yeah, I figured a lot of things out. It does help. It doesn't go away, but it does help.
Thank you.
I should write a book. In 10 years, I'll be done.
So I have just a few words about what Dave and Jolie said, because the way they put their opinion about war, it's a little bit different on the way I have in my mind. When you are facing like an army to army, it's different. When you sacrifice your life and you went over there just to bring freedom, whatever the reason, democracy to that region, it's totally different. But at the end of the day, we're gonna share one feeling. Whether I was in the front in the first Gulf War, whether I was in the front in the second Gulf War facing the, exactly, and or 2003, there is one factor. All the people involved with the war, as a soldiers or on the ground or anywhere in the bases, it's the fear. Everybody will be scared, and that's not a good thing. So I think we share that feeling together, nevertheless, where we were at that time. So the other thing about the experience from war and how you manage your life after that, I think age and experience. For me, if you ask me right now, I think I make a benefit of war. And that was because, when you're being in a situation that you have to pull a body pieces of your friend, of your partner, put it in a blanket, and then after years, now when you deal with a problem, let's say you have like a car accident or a flat tire or something that people will become panic when they face it. I says, well, no, come on, take it easy. It's a very simple issue. So at the end of the day, it's simply life is good. And life is a big frame. It's endless frame. and it has a lot of beautiful things. And inside that frame, there is bad things. One of the bad things is war. So there is a lot of good things in life. We have to look for it, and we have to enjoy it. And I learned, as a therapy, I learned that the beautiful things about life is the small things. It's not about the big titles. It's about the small things. Like this small gathering, it's beautiful. Okay, I don't care about impeachment and the talking about that. It's a big thing. Oh, no, come on, no. I have some friends here. That we have a nice chat. We can get a glass of wine together or a cup of coffee, whatever. Life is about the small things. Don't waste these small things. Enjoy it. So this is my way to get over what I face in the world, and I think it's worked with me.
Thank you.
I mean, I think some of the things I'd throw out there, the whole concept of therapy and talking, at least for me, it came in kind of many different ways. And I think the perspective of having some time away from it, to your point about continuing to reflect back upon some of those small things, there's a huge sense of pride when you get the brothers and sisters and the people you fought alongside, and or the civilians that you develop some relationships with. You talk about some of the hardest times for me personally to cope with my experiences, especially being in the Al-Anbar province. My last time boots on the ground in Iraq was in 2004, and we had a relatively reasonable hold between our efforts and the Iraqi Civil Defense Corps in, for a decent part of the province of Al-Anbar. And that's not to say that there wasn't still atrocities going on left and right, but when ISIS and ISIL started to really regain momentum, and literally watching somewhat of the news and seeing these places, my mind would immediately go back to Acer, who was, his family basically built an entire phosphorus concrete plant, or I should say rewired for us, so we could live somewhat of a Western lifestyle. Alf, who's, again, family who lived like in between us and Al-Qaim, he was one of the first people who kind of embraced us and tried to coach and teach and counsel and just talk about this. Here's the history behind these different sheikhs, and literally try and just be a honest broker, and not one with any intention, but literally, hey, here's what's going on. I've been in this region for X generations. Here's what's going on, and thinking about the massive destruction of those areas. And to your point about, oh my God, when bombing happens, the kids are there. For me, it was like, oh my God, where's Alf right now? Where's Acer and his family? Is Mukmuk, he's a guy that literally would cook us chicken shawarmas and pitas on a regular basis. Where is he right now? And just thinking about kind of the world where you have these really great moments where the sense of pride in being able to create somewhat of a, I guess what I'd say, stable environment, then just kind of goes all to hell with literally a whole new wave of insurgent activity and or conflict and or just rife fighting throughout the region. So those were some of the things that for me were the hardest and that caused the most chatter amongst all our colleagues and friends and fellow soldiers who were over there and kind of then had to think about, oh man, what about this family? What about these children? Man, they're probably 12 now. What are they doing, and how are they coping with this whole new extreme chaos in their lives? But I think that the humor aspect is a really salient one too, because when you're over there, you see things, and we don't need to get into gory detail, but you see things that you will never unsee, and it normalizes things that shouldn't be normalized. You talk about somebody with a bomb vest and ball bearings, like the result of that is nothing that you would want anybody to live through, or anybody to see, maybe is a better way to put it. So sometimes just pulling closer together and focusing on the small wins of being able to help a child that sprained their ankle and has no way of getting access to Western medicine, and helping a family who, quite frankly, when some of the tactics would be, if some of the families would start to be sympathetic towards American soldiers or help out American soldiers, then all hell would break loose on their families or their extended families based off of just insurgents. And some of these insurgents were from countries away, not even, blocks away, I guess, to put it in that perspective. And to be able to kind of provide some normalcy or security around these families who really put their entire existence on the line for the sake of trying to do a similar thing that we were out there trying to do: engage, develop a relationship, just be human and try and understand each other. And that's focusing on those small wins and focusing on those small kind of salient moments is what really stokes the pride. I guess I'm more of the idealist. I'm the optimist. I still have that 6-year-old kind of view that I guess you had back in those days, Julie, which that's something that's helped me at least.
Thanks, Dave.
One more thing, I didn't get chance to be in touch with the other side, like in the first Gulf War at least. But after 2003, I have a lot of American troops friends. I worked with them, and we were trying to build a new country. There was a big project. It's still like, it's became very complicated later. But 2003 was totally different experience for me as a soldier. It was more about a human relation with the other part of the equation. So the American troops, when they were traveling around the blocks and between the neighborhood, everybody was happy first time when they arrived, and then it became like, it's a political game. But me personally, I have a lot of friends from the Navy and the Marines, and Taji especially, I've been there many times. I've been in Al-Assad, Anaconda. I've been there a lot. So it's different experience. And I think there's not enough time to talk about that, but it's totally different experience.
Julie?
Yeah, I think I'm going to say something that builds off what Helbard said about how sometimes you look back and it's so striking how absolutely ridiculous and hilarious everything is, because it's kind of like the only way you can process it all. After I'd gotten out, I moved to New Zealand for a couple years, and turns out it was the best thing for me. It saved my life. It was calm, it was safe, it was quiet. The first day I got to the town where I was going to start working, it's a super tiny town, the home of like the New Zealand Gold Rush. It was like maybe 3,500 people. Total tourist trap, super tiny. And I'm walking from my hostel to my job just to see where it is for the first time. And I'm in like board shorts, flip-flops, like a tank top, tattoos everywhere, a shaved head. I really fit in quite well. And it's such a small town, it's an all-volunteer fire department. And their air raid siren was like a proper Tora hand crank, like World War II. And I'm walking down the street, crossing, and I just hit the deck. And my backpack spewed everywhere. My huge body just took up the middle of the road. And I'm like, oh God. Like, I can guarantee that I'm in some tourist picture, just like picking up my shit, like trying to get it in my bag, trying to pretend like it didn't happen. And that was like the moment where I was like, you might not be okay.
And what have you done to deal with the residual feelings?
I drank a lot. I'm a big proponent for therapy. I can't wait to have insurance that isn't through the VA so I can go to like a therapist that's not going to be stuck in my record. I've gone to counseling here or there, but I think you have to therapy is like a marriage. You have to find someone that you feel comfortable enough sharing that with, and I don't know if I've made that connection with anybody yet. I talk to my family. I have a very supportive family. I meet new friends over beers, and sometimes we take that to a couple beers and then stuff starts coming out. But I mean, you know, education really saved me. Where I met you, I learned a lot about that, like what I was feeling was okay through what I was reading and through what I was engaging with. And education became a big distraction for me. So like I put everything into that, just tucking everything else away.
Thanks. Hamza?
For me, one way to move forward was to fully believe and understand that everything that had happened is out of my control. It wasn't just within my control, it's out of all of us here. It's out of our control, no matter what our position was in that situation. And once I fully believed that, deep in my core, I learned to focus on being present and focus on today and this moment. And since I've adopted that sort of way of living, I've been able to overcome quite a bit of what used to hold me back.
Just interesting, you've all kind of touched on this in different ways, but those personal connections with an individual, those places of lightness within the darkness, I wonder if each could you just choose a moment, either through the war years or through recovery afterwards, a moment of lightness within the darkness, an interaction, something that happened, something that you hold on to as a positive amidst chaos.
I'll start. I feel like I just finished talking, but I'll do some more. As you know, female searcher, I would go on raids and stuff like that. And one raid in particular, it was late at night. We roll up to this concrete block of apartments that's built just sort of like a big square with a courtyard, pretty common, a gate to come in and out. And we'd been in country for a while now. I'd been on a couple raids with these guys. For some reason, they let me be in the stack. It was like the one and only time I'd ever done it. It was terrifying. But, you know, you stack up with your buddies and you go in and clear, clear, clear. Everyone's sleeping. We ransack the house. We wake everybody up. But my job was to, like, guys made sure they had extra ammo. I made sure that I had Beanie Babies and candy and crayons and coloring books. And I would take the women and children into a room where they didn't have to see what these guys were doing to their homes. And I would entertain them and, you know, make silly faces or let them play with my NVGs or whatever else. In this apartment, I had 2 adult women and 2 small girls. One was Sarah and one was Suri, I think. And, you know, we're coloring and everything else, and they're like, the gentleman just welcomed us into his house. We're like, we're so sorry. He goes, if this is what you have to do to keep us safe, I'm okay dealing with this, which I found profound and crazy at the same time. But the little girl, we were getting on like a house on fire, and then it came time to leave, and you know, I give them all hugs goodbye, and I go downstairs, and you can hear down the concrete steps like little bare feet slapping on them, and she came down, and she like jumped in my arms, gave me a big hug, and she wanted me to write a note in English saying that, you know, we came to her house and that they were wonderful, like, they're good guys, nothing bad happened, they were so welcoming. And I wrote all this, and then the interpreter wrote it in Arabic on the back, and he was like, she's gonna take this to school tomorrow, and she's gonna show all of her friends, and she's gonna tell them that you came to her house, and you gave her these toys, and you gave her these crayons, and like chalk, you know, they'd never seen colored sidewalk chalk. And so for me, that was a transformative moment, knowing that there's a lot of awful going on, but hopefully this little girl remembers that like one person took some time to be nice to her and to like make a genuine connection beyond language.
Thanks, Julie.
I can assure you. I have kids in the same situation, and they still remember that. Yeah, this experience, I've been in it a couple times after 2003, and Hamza remember it. He's my oldest son, and my daughter Malak and Yaseen. My daughter Malak, she took a couple photos with the American soldier, and she was so happy. Hey, Dad, look. And, you know, it was really like very optimistic for most of the Iraqi people when, you know, we was under a regime, a dictatorship regime for more than 30 years. Iraq was switched to like a big jail, and we been involved in 2 major wars, against Iran and against Kuwait. And it was like, typically, literally for no reason. Just because of stupid decision he made at that time, and he pushed us toward that hell. So 2003 was like a dream became true. So most of the Iraqi, the situation you're talking about, and I believe there is hundreds, thousands of these situations happened. Iraqi people, they look for the American soldiers as a human, and they like them because, oh, they bring us freedom. They get rid of Saddam. That was the worst thing we faced. So, but later on, yeah, things goes different ways. It's very complicated to discuss it right now, but yeah. Yeah, I be in this situation, I know. And we have photos, by the way, from Malak and Hamza with the army troops. And me personally, yeah, I worked with the American forces in different bases, and they were trying their best to rebuild our country. I was involved as a contractor at that time to rebuild schools and hospitals, roads. So, but we'll see. Things will change.
Others, personal interactions, stories that made you able to get through this?
I think this is kind of the light side of it for like on a day-to-day basis, how you get through it. For me, when I was a kid, when these bomb raids would be at their peak, everybody would know, weeks in advance, and this made the families come together. And because nobody wanted to be apart in case somebody got hit. If we were going to go, we were all going to go together, which sounds terribly morbid saying it out loud, but that was the thinking behind it. And so as a kid, it was this feeling of, oh, we're having a party. And we would all gather, and we would light candles and go to the basement, and people would play music. And there was a good level of denial happening with the adults. They would be drinking, and there would be music, and meanwhile the bombs are going off, and you pause for a moment, and somebody holds you, keeps you, kind of safe in that moment. And I remember when we knew that the bombs were in a different neighborhood, that they were not close to us, my grandfather would take me to the roof, and he would wear like a cooking pot on his head as protection. And we would watch as if it was fireworks. And the next morning, my grandmother would find out where those houses had been that had been hit, and we would take a taxi, and we would go with hundreds of other people, and we would watch. And there would be a building that was completely obliterated, and there would be a building next to it that kind of looked like a dollhouse with the front completely fallen, but people's belongings inside of it. And I don't know if this is something that I have repressed, or I in the moment, it wasn't what it would be now, right? If I went back and I was in that sort of setting, I think I would have a different experience of it than when you have it as a child. It just is. It's normal. Yeah.
Thank you, Erika.
Sugar Smacks, the cereal, Sugar Smacks. That was like the best thing that ever happened to me over there. There's when the government fails, like when the whole like structure falls apart, you don't get the pipeline is done. The chain of the resources coming, everything's like done. So you don't have the stuff that you were getting the day before. And I remember how food lines started happening. We saw the people waiting to get food for hours and hours to just get bread, to get something. But we still had Sugar Smack cereal for some reason. And I remember as a kid looking at the box and this frog, the character on the sugar, I think they don't even make Sugar Smacks anymore, but there was this frog character that was like high on methamphetamines, just screaming, and he's like so excited to have this Sugar Smacks. And I look at this, and the writing is in English, and I'm like, I know this is a cool place, wherever this is, because they have frogs that are high and super stoked. So we finally leave, and we get to America, and we had some relatives that had already left, and we lived with them, and they're like, you need to go to the grocery store. We're like, what's the grocery? They're like, trust me, this is the coolest place ever. So we go to a grocery store, and I'm walking, and there's food everywhere, stuff everywhere. And I get into the cereal aisle, and there's 8,000 different cereals, all with characters high in methamphetamine screaming at me. And I'm just standing there. I'm like, this is the best place in the world. This is it. We made it. And I'm looking at these cereals, and my mother just gives me a few minutes to like soak it all in, count, the Chocula, Count Chocula. There's the, all the different Fruit Loops and everything. My mom's like, what do you want? I go, Sugar Smacks. I want the Sugar Smacks. Went home with the Sugar Smacks. Yeah, that was every time I heard, I don't know if it still exists. I haven't seen Sugar Smacks. I don't really eat that much cereal anymore. But Sugar Smacks is the best thing ever.
Thanks, Helbard.
That is too good. I'll do two quick ones, and one is just about the human connection. I don't know if it was Christmas Eve or Christmas when we were over in Iraq, and we were coming back in from a big patrol, and I kind of mentioned a guy by the name of Acer before. His village and his little, more so a neighborhood, probably about 40 to 50 homes. But anyway, we would always drive through that on our way back to, our base, FOB Tiger. Anyway, we were driving back, and Acer kind of heard us. Our tracked vehicles, they're not exactly incognito, so you can hear pretty far away. So anyway, needless to say, he comes out, and he's waving at us, and we know him, so we stopped, and kind of got off, dismounted, and we're chatting with him. And he's like, hey, would you mind coming here? And, around kind of almost this little courtyard, his whole kind of community had just set up, just assuming we were all Christians, a Christmas tree, and just this massive feast of, all types of things. And we would laugh about it because, they didn't waste much. So you'd get, goats, and you'd get some things. And it's not like we had time to stay there and hang out. But they're like, you got to take this, you got to take the Christmas tree. So I think at that point we had like 4 Bradleys on this patrol. And it's literally almost like what I do now to try and get rid of my kids' stuff. There is just people coming out of the woodworks trying to cram a tree in the back of our Bradley, like a cooked goat that's all, part of it was delicious. Part of it, we were like, oh my God, this is gonna give us PTSD more than some of the other stuff we've seen. But the cutest thing was then the kids started getting into it too. And, they bring these, their toys and their raggy stuffed animals and try and give them to you. And it was literally this prideful heart. We wouldn't take any of the toys, or we almost took this really cool like big wheel because we were like, man, that thing would be awesome. But we didn't. But that was one. And then the other one was when we did our first show of force, when we kind of landed in Husaybah and we're on the Syrian border. There was, Saddam statues and Uday and Qusay everywhere, right? So part of the show of force was driving one of our big old track vehicles right through the middle of that statue and, hey, we're here. Of course, a big America thing to do, right? But most people were happy to get that ugly thing down anyway. But anyway, 10 months later, kind of rebuilt most of it and taken away the propaganda. And about 2 months before we left, we'd kind of pulled off for about 3 or 4 days and left the Iraqi Civil Defense Corps, which we had trained up. But anyway, they and the community had taken upon themselves to decorate the Syrian border checkpoint, and it was an American flag, and it was an Iraqi flag, and written in Arabic and in English was "Goodbye from a free Iraq." And that one still sticks with us all, and we have pictures in front of that thing, and that was a prideful moment. So,
Thank you.
I'll recite a couple as well. We should talk outside of this, Helbard.
Sugar snacks?
Similar. Candy canes. And I am someone, for anyone who knows me well, I do not like sweets. I don't partake in candy and that flavor in general. But I had seen candy cane on cartoons and on TV growing up, and I thought they were fictional. It did not occur to me that this is something real. It's something we drew in school as part of Christmas and whatnot, but I did not think they were real. And I remember, I want to say it was probably December of 2003, we're playing soccer on the street. A troop of Humvees are doing their patrol, 3 Humvees, and we pause our game because we cannot continue to play, but they drive slowly. And the gunner who's sitting at the top starts throwing candy canes to us. And I was like, is this real? And I wanted to collect them in the different colors that they came in. There was the classic red and white, and then there was ones with the mint with the green stripe as well. And I was ecstatic. I just could not believe. And they were, A, incredibly hard to unwrap. Someone's got to refigure out this packaging. But B, they were terrible. They were as far as I remember, they were about as big of a disappointment as I've had in that time. They hurt my teeth. They stuck to my gums. They tasted terrible. And I was caught in this middle ground. That was a very strange middle ground between both being really happy and excited to have them, and at the same time incredibly sad and disappointed in what they are actually like. And so I think I lied to myself and said that I liked them, but I never ate them again. So that was one.
Nobody told you they're really meant just as decoration. That's why they're so hard to open.
Probably makes sense.
They're from 6 Christmases ago.
Maybe from 1991, and they forgot to put them out. And then the second one, and I think this is the one that my dad was talking about earlier with taking photos. It was I was a teenager. I was 15 years old, and it was my very first hug from a female that was not a family member. Her name was Jessica, and jolly, she was beautiful. And she didn't have any armor around her. She took off her helmet. She had a hat. She was just smiling and laughing and telling jokes and laughing with all of us. And she gave me a hug, and I was like, holy smokes, I'm going to go back to school, and I'm going to tell everybody I got a hug from a U.S. soldier. And I thought she loved me. Like for all I know, she's in love. She's out there looking for me right now. But that was my narrative. Maybe she disagrees, but those were my experiences.
Thank you all. Thank you for your stories. We had some questions. I don't know if people wrote them down or they just want to ask them. We can get the microphone to you if you need to. A few minutes for questions. Yes. Media representation of your culture, your background, your language, your experiences.
I'll go. I think the part that gets to me the most is when we are represented, we're shown as one thing. That 80 million Iranians all believe the same thing. My family does not believe the same thing. So I don't understand that. I see it as a way to dehumanize, to make us into a pawn in a game, and it's really upsetting. you see it in Hollywood and in movies and Homeland, and we just kind of become these extras of the American drama that is happening, as if we don't have our own lives and families and histories, and that word keeps coming back, that it's about dehumanization. And I don't think wars can happen if we don't do that. I don't think we're capable of doing that if we actually see each other as what we are, which is human beings. So I think the media has a big part in it. Yeah.
Thank you, Erika.
So I wish I can give you the answer in my mother language in Arabic. I just wrote an article about that a few weeks ago. I'll try my best to express the idea about media. I remember we used to call it the fourth power. Fourth authority, okay. So I think these days or recently it's became the first authority. So, and I believe as a person that the media has became the new brand, the new way of war. So you can change a regime, a system in a country using the media. You don't need to send forces anymore. So media, social media, TV, news, this is what's happening right now. This is why we are in the middle of a lot of very complicated situation to pick up the truth. It's not easy to pick it anymore. Before you have like, let's say, one newspaper, you read it, and that's it. Right now you have like thousands of sources of information. Everybody has a cell phone, and he can record anything, and he can post it. And if you are an active guy on the Facebook or Twitter, and you have followers, you will be the representative of the truth. Nevertheless, what you are saying. So my idea, my point regarding the media, it's really the first authority, no more the fourth.
I just want to add one thing to that. It's interesting that the same thing that can be dehumanizing, can lead to one single narrative, can also be a place where you can talk to people who are individuals. You can put a human face on these things. As I was researching the Iraq War, writing poems about it, what was astonishing is how many Iraqis would begin to open up their hearts, their lives, to tell me stories that went beyond headlines, to try and put human faces to this. So if you're willing to dig deeper beyond the single narrative, there are so many narratives out there that we can listen to, like we're listening now, that can change and put a human face on these things.
And I'd like to add, to answer your question, and from my side, Die Hard, the one where his wife gets captured at that, Bruce Willis's wife, is it the first one? Die Hard 1. That's one of my favorite movies for one reason only, is because the group of terrorists is a group of white German men. And that narrative has shifted quite a bit from the 90s. And I think that says a lot about how media operates. In the 90s, that was the look that we had. It didn't matter what skin color they had or what religion they practiced. It was just bring any people, make them bad people, that's it. And then the narrative shifted. And this is why we're here. This is why we set up this space. Because these are the voices that are the majority. This is for me personally, this is a responsibility to speak up for a lot of people and make their voices heard, because they don't get seen on the news. They don't get heard anywhere. There's no platform. So media could be very dangerous, and it could be very beneficial as well. But what's difficult is you never know when it's being completely truthful, and you never know when it's being manipulative.
Thank you.
If you were in Tehran in the 70s, early 70s, you couldn't tell the difference between Tehran and any American city. It was very similar. Iran was very westernized. It had liquor stores. It was, you know, people were wearing what they wanted to wear. Women were allowed to show their hair. It was very Western. And when I try to explain that to people, that I rarely remember seeing women covered in covering their faces and not wearing. I don't remember the photos I have in my photo album. Everyone's partying, listening to music, and having a great time. That's not how the Western culture sees Iran and sees how what we think in America now, the Middle East is a desert. It's just this big desert with old buildings, and some of them are destroyed. And it's such a weird way of seeing that part of the world, and it's not like that. The weather isn't like that. Iran has trees. There's snow in Iran. We used to play in the snow in Iran. It snows there. I know this for a fact. I played in the snow in Iran. And people think it's just a desert all year long and nothing happens. Yes, we are the media now. And it could be empowering that we can actually go someplace and post a picture of the snow and say, guess what, it snows in Tehran. But it is being manipulated. But yeah, the representation is totally off. We have to, when we were kids, we used to go to the library and research stuff on our own. You know, what's that? Go and like look it up, and everything was vetted, and nothing's vetted now. So everyone thinks that Iran is just a giant sandy place with no snow.
Can I add something to that? The whole thing about, you know, Iran used to be much more westernized and women used to wear whatever they wanted to wear. Yes, true. And even something like that can be weaponized. And so like right after the Soleimani assassination, there were all these memes going around the social media by, we're not getting political, but by people who were in support of let's go and liberate Iranians. And there would be photos of look what they were like now, and there would be a woman, Iranian woman in a miniskirt, and then look what they're like now, and there would be like the most covered up woman, and that is not a representation of Iranian women of the class that I come from, for example. So even that can be quite weaponized and used towards a certain agenda. So don't trust anything you see.
And maybe trust people you meet and talk to them and listen to them.
I think for me, along that similar vein, I think one of the reasons Hamza and I reached out to each other to try and set this up was because of like just the grotesque stuff that was being shared on social media about Soleimani's assassination. And I went on this huge rant on Facebook because I do that. Sorry to anyone who's my friend. But you know, I was like, the people that I met in Iraq were the most gracious and generous and kind and giving people I'd ever met in my life. They don't live there in their communities with like the American notion of you're an individual and you're special just the way you are and you're unique and you can do everything you need to do on your own. They're a true community and they rely on each other for their livelihoods, and they live in these communities and they embrace one another and they embraced us. And to have, and I assumed it would have been the same in Iran had I been there, or when I was in Turkey, it was like that, you know? It's just this amazing culture and civilization that lends itself to generosity and acceptance. And when I saw the horrific stuff coming out about how it doesn't matter, it's just Iran, like they're backwards, we can erase them in like 30 seconds. It's like when you allow your brain to get to that point, you're not only erasing a civilization that's far older than any of us ever give it credit for, but like you're erasing all those stories in your You're erasing all the things that connect us to those people. And so like the media narrative for like engaging with the Middle East, I think absolutely needs to change. And I think at some point, maybe, hopefully, we'll get there when we're not so distracted every 35 seconds. But I know on the other lens of that, as a veteran, like the weird overt patriotism. I remember watching parts of the Super Bowl, and I'm like, why is there so many American flags? Like, when did America just become football? Like, all the little kids have American flags on their T-shirts, and they're doing flyovers, and they're shooting off red, white, and blue this, and red, white, and blue that, and it's like, you know, and then the reunion on the House floor. Like, there is nothing more awkward than a homecoming. That shouldn't be a moment to be shared in front of an entire nation. That's a private moment for reflection. It's awkward, you haven't seen each other. So I think the media politicizes the veteran, and they exploit them to push a narrative, but then at the same time, they push a narrative and exploit the people that we engage with on the other side as well. So I think it's just gonna take a lot of people demanding accountability from different stakeholders within the media, and I think that's starting to happen with like disinformation coming out in droves on Facebook. People are finally starting to be like, look, we need real solid information. And I think we're seeing like a tide changing in that, where a majority of people want real information, I think, I hope. So maybe that, sugar smacks.
Thanks, Julie. Is there another question? We'll probably end here.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that last one. And I think there's two things I like to play off. One, Hamza, yours, control what you can control. And Dave, yours, just talk to people. I think that's one of the biggest things. Like I agree, and this is going back to 2003. When we would engage with local Iraqis, you're talking about 30 years of a dictatorship. Almost everybody we talked to had I got jacked up by Saddam or his henchmen story, and most of them had some of the most absurd, tortured, scars, disfigured stuff to kind of back up their claims, so to speak, and so whether or not there's all types of complications about that specific conflict, but once you got there, it was definitely agendas that we're trying to talk about. Were there WMDs or not WMDs? And there's this pretty salient, I guess you'd call it a cartoon that I remember, and instead of focusing, it was like, oh man, there's mass graves, and there was, I think it was a donkey and a elephant looking around and saying, yep, no WMDs here, and then there was some other mass shooting and or atrocity, no WMDs here, and I think it echoes the point that most of us have said on the agenda. Beware of the agenda. And I mean, if that's what the reality is, then the only thing you can do is listen, be empathetic, get out of your comfort zone, seek engaging people. And to me, that was the biggest thing, and that's something that we all can control. Back to Hamza's point. So, what that's worth.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for everybody on the panel for being here and for sharing your stories and your hearts with us tonight. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then Yaseen will try to lighten us with a little comedy afterwards. And talking, if you want to, during the break, talk with some of the people on stage, please do so. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Let's thank all our panelists. Thank you so much. And thanks for coming out.
Oh, hey, y'all. This is, we're ready, right? Stand up, right? It's happening. Yeah. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say this is the weirdest stand-up show I've ever been on. My dad performed. That's cool. This is crazy because like it ended, and then now there's one more narcissist that has to say something. Like this feels. I wanted to go home with everyone. Everybody clapped. I felt it. I was like, this is perfect. Like, and now we gotta ruin it with this guy. Like that's. But no, I thank you for being here. I want to thank my brother. That was fucking awesome. Okay. Oh, there's children. Shout out to the children that are in the building. Let's shout out everybody. I'm excited, man. Everything that happened tonight, I can't really wrap up. I've been using stand-up as a space to vocalize about my own experience. I'm 6 years younger than my brother. When we came to the United States, I was 12 years old. And the reason why we look like this and sound like this, I think it's a process of assimilation. What happened to me is, on the third day, you did this to me, dude. On the third day, you're like, go to school, man. Like, you've survived traumatic experiences. You got this. I went into school and I met my teacher. Her name was Miss Smith. And Miss Smith was like, she did the thing where she brought me in front of the class and she's like, hey, here's this new kid. Look at him. And I was terrified because all I knew what to say was like, hi, nice to meet you. And so she asked me for my name and I said, Yaseen. And she said, Jason? And I was like, I can't go nice to meet you right here because then I'm Jason. But then I thought, this could be like my way to be a white boy. Like I could just come out. I could be Jason. I'm just like standing there like traumatized and just like broken about what to be right now. I'm already 3 days in, identity crisis, dude. Like, so she's like looking at me like, this kid is broken. We have to do something. And the kids are like, this kid's messed up. We're gonna bully him. He's weak. He's weak already. Like, so she tried to reel me back in, and she asked for my full name. Some of you know where this is going, all right? You were there, apparently. I don't know. So Iraqis have really long full names. So I just immediately hit her with, yeah, my name's Yaseen Mazin Shamsuddin Abdelamir Kadhim Hussein Kadhim Haidar Ahmed Haidari. That's not how the kids reacted. That's not how it went down. So now everybody's laughing and like, what is, and the teacher was like, get this Harry Potter stuff out of here, dude. Like, I'm tired of it. We just finished the book. We don't need this. Is what she may as well have said, because what she said was, oh, you're one of those. Like, that's how she made sense of everything. Like, I got this. I can handle it now. He's one of them. We can do it. And then the kids are just dying, and I think as a teacher she noticed there's like a little bully vibe going on. So she even tried further to make it better for me, and she asked a wonderful question. She asked me how many names that was. And I was like, okay, I know my numbers, like I can do this. So I just went in confidently. I was like, around 9/11. And that's why I sound like this, you guys. That's why if you see me, I say bro a lot. Like, I do this thing. Like, what is this thing? I just do it out of nowhere. I think it's me contemplating suicide. Like, this is, how you doing? I think that's what it is, man. It's crazy because, like, I didn't ask to be here, man. Like, I appreciate all that stuff about what media is. Because even living in Iraq, I was a child and I was sheltered. I only knew through the media until the war, until I knew what the true Saddam was. To me, Saddam was like this amazing guy because that's all I get presented. And my parents and the adults wouldn't tell me otherwise. He was like a good Saddam was like my Santa Claus. Like just roll with it, man. This guy's amazing. And then we go to school and we do a chant about him. It was great. So to know that Saddam was like this amazing guy, And then to hear about war happening, it was so confusing because I'm like, wait, do they not know who we got? Like, who wants this beef right now? Who? I got the news I could read. I was in 2nd grade. Suck it. I was like, who is this country? 3 letters. We're dealing with this. We're gonna destroy USA. I don't know who USA is. But they're about to get Saddam banked, and we got banged, you guys. Like we got banged so hard. I live in USA. Like, it's amazing too. I'm not mad about it. Like, it's kind of weird. I have freedom now. It's cool. I got here in middle school, like I said, 6th grade, and I experienced freedom right away. I heard this girl say, "I hate my dad." She said it like that too. I don't know. She really hated her dad. I was like, you can do that? Like, that's an option? I thought you had to love them, man. Like, it's crazy, man. It really is. And stand up, I get to vocalize about it, and I just want to talk about like school early on, because I think that's a beautiful topic for a little bit. And to me, it's beautiful because I know what it's like to have a first world and a third world bully. And I say that as pretty because it is. I'll prove it. Like, first world bullies, they were like, oh, hey, that's that Iraqi kid. Like, what are you going to do? Allahu Akbar. By the way, this is going to get dark. Yeah, this is going to, I need a heads up right now because I could kill a vibe. The kids did that, and then it's funny because like that's what I ran away from. Like, that's my problems that I got away from, and they're like, "This is you now." It's like, it's haunting. So like I had to adapt, and I had to accept that I'm a terrorist somehow. Like, I had to, and that's how I survived middle school. And then that's first world bullies. Third world bullies, they were just terrorists, man. They were just flat out. They were not making the sounds. They were actually doing the blowing up thing, and it was a much smoother experience. I didn't have to run crying. I could have just cried in the bathroom. You know, that's. Man, the kids were. I don't blame the kids because it all goes back to media and what we represent and like what's being shown to us. Like, to me, Saddam was the greatest. It's the same thing when it was going on during the war. I mean, I realized early on, when I tell people I'm Iraqi, they're like, what? They make those in white? That's insane. That is absolutely crazy. You're talking nonsense right now. And it's just because they didn't put us on the news, man. Like, could you imagine my face in like 2003? Like that would provoke empathy to pull out of the war. And you don't want that. Like, if you guys saw me, you would have been like, what? There's people there? We gotta help the baristas. What are we doing? Like, the media does play a factor. And yeah, man, how are we doing? Because that's about all I prepared. I don't know. I could do a lot of dirty jokes, but I think that's what I've summoned up as a comic. I think I should just take this time to actually give thanks to all of you guys. I think this space is amazing. I use stand-up to open up about this. I didn't know there was another option. I think if I knew about this, I wouldn't be doing stand-up because this is way better option. And I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the venue for letting us have this. I want to thank my brother, my parents, and everybody that came out. The speakers were amazing. And most importantly is you guys. Thank you for taking in all this information and listening to what we have to say. So I think a message was started off with my dad. He was speaking about love and how important it is to love. I think there are two mentalities in this world. Is the victim mentality and the person that can understand the situation and say, hey, we're all in this together, and then they could pick up people. And I think we're those kind of people, and I think we need to help others. So without further ado, I love you guys. Thank you very much.